What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with a little science and Bible lesson. The science lesson that I'm sure many of you have heard is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. See, so most of us were trying to leave you fucking Christians alone. We were trying to leave you alone and let you believe your ridiculous nonsense that's written in this book you call the Holy Bible. But you didn't want to leave us and our pornography videos alone. You took extreme exception to the fact that we were enjoying ourselves in the privacy of our own homes, and so you decided to try to legislate our lives away from us. That was the action that you took. And that action and my inability to talk about one of my favorite subjects on this channel, which is sex, without it crushing the algorithm or having half of my fucking audience abandon the topic like the hypocritical liars that you are, this is the equal and opposite reaction. What we're going to be talking about in a series of videos that some of you are really going to enjoy and some of you are going to fucking hate is I'm going to be going through a whole bunch of Bible studies and picking this book apart in its entirety to show you why I'm not a Christian anymore and why every single person who believes that this book is a history text or an inerrant text or a text that contains any kind of valuable information about how you live your life is an absolute fucking imbecile. And we're going to go through that in glorious fashion. So since you couldn't leave well enough alone, you couldn't let me talk about the things that I like to talk about, you couldn't let my wife and I enjoy the things that we like to enjoy in the privacy of our own home, we're going to be talking about all the ways that Christianity is fucking stupid because the YouTube algorithm is run by people on the left, and they hate Christianity. They hate it. So I suspect that my anti-Christian ideas are probably going to be promoted very heavily by the algorithm, whereas the other topics, not so much. You are very free on this platform to discuss religion and all of its inadequacies. So today what we're going to be talking about is the biblical creation story, or as I like to call it, the creation myth. Because that's what it is. It's a myth told by desert-dwelling idiots to other desert-dwelling idiots trying to give them some type of structure to live by. As the famous Lewis Black said, when talking about the Jewish people who wrote the Bible, he said, what you Christians don't know is that you don't understand my people. You don't understand the Jewish people. And what we're really good at is bullshit. See, Jews by and large understand that this book is total bullshit. As Lewis Black said, they had to come up with some kind of moral framework because men were running into camp with camels saying, I'm in love. And so in order to fucking rein in these insane people living in the desert with no air conditioning, they had to write this book to tell them all of the things they can and can't do, should and shouldn't do, and then try to give them some kind of place to exist in the world around them. Unfortunately, the people who wrote the book were only half smart. They weren't scientists, and they wrote something I think that they probably just intended to last like a little while until something better came along. And boy, did that fucking go wrong. So today what we're going to be talking about is the Christian creation myth. And we're going to be going line by line. This is going to be read from the New International Version if you'd like to follow along, although any of the versions will work. And I'm going to show you piece by piece just how idiotic the things that you people believe are. This is going to come as a surprise to most of you Christians because the vast majority of you don't read the Bible anyway and have no fucking clue what it says. So this might at least be enlightening to some of you. In Genesis chapter 1, and don't worry, this won't take terribly long because God's going to create the entire known universe in one chapter and one verse of this gigantic book. Right then and there, you should know something's like a little bit suspicious. just like Dave Chappelle said, it's a little bit suspicious that all of creation that is completely beyond our fathoming, is that a word? Exists, and it only gets one chapter and like one verse of this entire 2,000 some odd page book. I mean, it's massive. I've read this book cover to cover twice in 2 different translations, and the New Testament more times than I can count. So, buckle up, because here we go. Genesis 1, chapter 1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." Well, see, I'm right out the gate, I'm confused. He said the earth was formless and void, and that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters? Don't you think water is something? Certainly not nothing. So you've got the Spirit of God, who is, and God, remember, is supposed to be omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent. He's supposed to be everywhere at once. But for the purposes of Genesis chapter 1, he's condensed himself down to this finite location where he's hovering over the waters of the earth that is formless. So I happen to have a glass of water right here. I think we could all agree that this is not nothing. Water's definitely something. And there's some of you in the audience, you know, sometimes people we like to categorize everything. We'll break people down to half empty, glass half empty and glass half full kind of people. And I really love when somebody says, you know, I'm kind of a glass half empty or glass half full kind of person. And I always want to go, well, that makes you kind of a fucking idiot, doesn't it? Because if you look at the glass is never empty. It's impossible for this glass to ever be empty. In its current state, it's half full of water and half full of air, but it's not empty. If I pour all the water out of the glass, then the glass becomes full of air. And if I fill the glass full of water, then it becomes full of water. But it's never fucking empty. That's just the way science works. See, we're surrounded by something at all times. The other major problem we have here, despite the fact that God has created this earth that is formless and void, but that it has water on it, is the water itself. Does anybody in the class know what water is? It's a molecule. And a molecule is a combination of atoms. In the case of water, it's hydrogen, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So you can't have water until you have hydrogen and oxygen. And you can't have hydrogen or oxygen until you have something to make them. And what makes hydrogen is stars. That's where atoms are born. So you can't get water without first having stars. And if my memory serves me correctly, we're not even going to get stars until day 4. Now, rest assured, the days are going to be a problem too. But so God's Spirit is hovering over the waters on the empty, void earth. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. What light? From where? Where did this light come from? Where was this light? See, the problem with light that the desert-dwelling idiots that wrote this book probably didn't understand is that it's not static. When you look up at the sun, it appears as if there's a glowing ball in the sky. What we now know is that light is a wavelength. First of all, it's produced in photons, and they actually travel through space. So as I was saying in my video about the sun, which is a helium reactor, the sun fuses, the fusion reactor, sun fuses hydrogen into helium, and the process releases photons. And so those photons travel to Earth where we see them as visible light. So you can't just have light. It's not like you could just put light in the sky and have it just sit there or just have it be all over the place. Light is constantly moving. So God says on day one that let there be light, and there was light, but he hasn't created anything that could possibly produce the light yet. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. He separated the light from the darkness. See, we don't need God to separate light from darkness. That's what light does. That's the job that light has. If you turn the lights off, you'll notice that you're in darkness. When the fucking sun goes on the other side of the earth, you'll notice that it becomes dark outside. We don't need God to separate the light from the darkness. That's what light does, quite of its own. So more idiocy already, and we're only into verse number 3. God saw that the light was good, separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day? The first day. How can we have a day? Does the biblical author not understand what a day is? A day is an arbitrary thing. I hope all of you understand that. We call it a day every time the earth revolves on its axis. That's the reason, maybe some of you Christians didn't know this, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It's not because the sun is moving, which is what the biblical author might have you believe. It's because the fucking earth is moving. And so when the earth rotates one time around its axis, that's called a day. On earth, that's 24 hours. On some planets, it's 267 Earth days, which I believe is the day length of the planet Venus. So there was morning and evening the first day is more than a little bit vague. But once again, we still don't have a sun to be revolving around or rotating in front of in order for there to even be a day to begin with. So really right here and there, we're only 5 verses into this creation story, and it's already totally impossible bullshit that unfortunately almost 50% of the American population believes is the literal way that their planet was created. That's the scary part. People that you're actually driving half-ton hunks of steel down the highway, only divided by their car and your car by little white dashed lines, those people who are operating those machines are stupid enough to think that what I'm reading to you is how their planet was fucking created. The decisions they make about how they live their lives, how you should live your lives, the laws that they pass, is based on an understanding that this is how planet Earth was created. So this is why I've been telling you, despite the fact that I'm decidedly a right-wing, or at least I've thought I was a decidedly right-wing American, the idea that the Christian right could gain total power in this country is more than a little bit terrifying, because these people are effectively insane. To believe that Earth was created consistent with the writing in this book makes you literally fucking insane. There is absolutely no way in the reality that we are currently living in that it possibly could have taken place like this. So for you Christians who look at this book as if it's just kind of like a guide, and Genesis as if it's just kind of a story, then maybe there's some hope for you. But for those of you who look at this book and think that it is God-breathed, that this book was authored by God and not desert-dwelling morons, then there is no hope for you. You cannot possibly exist in this world and have the, we could not possibly exist in this world and have the technology that we have if in fact this is the way that things worked. None of our technology would work if God can put lights in the fucking sky that are not stars and then somehow remove them, but as we'll see coming up, he does it. So moving right along, and God said, let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it, and it was so. What? This sounds insane, doesn't it? So there's earth that's formless and void, except for all the water that's on it. And then God decides to separate the water on the earth from the water above the earth. What fucking water above the earth? See, like, you would want to believe that this is just total insanity that no one has actually believed is true. But if you look this up on Google right now, you can find pictures that have been drawn by Christian apologists that show the firmament that we're going to talk about in a minute as if it was like some kind of a dome that covers the top of the earth, and then they drew water on top of that firmament so that God's biblical story could be real. So we've got water on earth, and then we've got water in effectively what would be space, which of course is impossible, but there's actually pictures been drawn trying to make sense of this nonsense. And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let ground appear, and it was so. What do you mean, be gathered to one place? So God said that the earth was formless and void, which apparently means that there is no core, no mantle, no crust, no actual ground at all. So apparently in the beginning when God created the earth, it was a big ball of water that was empty. So we have an empty, formless, void ball of water, and then from this ball of water, God gathered the water into one place and let ground appear. So did that mean that he lowered the water, like the ground was already underneath the water, and he lowered the water so that the ground could appear? Or he poofed the ground into existence in the middle of the water? So did he have a ball of water and then insert into it the core of the earth and the mantle and the crust, which would be the earth, and then have the water now only like one tiny portion of this whole thing? Like, how exactly, where did this land come from, consistent with everything that we now know to be factual about the world that we live in? Because see, we can fucking drill into it, and we can do tests and research to determine what the earth is made of. We know things about the core because of the electromagnetic field that the earth has. We know that there's poles on the earth that control this, that define the electromagnetism of the earth itself, and that this requires something. This requires a core in order to function. But God, in His infinite wisdom, doesn't explain any of these things, and so far, every single thing that He's explained in His silly little book here is impossible to have occurred. You cannot have any of these things occur in the order, at least, that they have occurred. Moving right along, God called the dry ground land, and He gathered waters He called seas, and God saw that it was good. So now the water actually has a name. It's the seas, and the dry ground is the land. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit, with seeds in it, according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. So pay attention to that word kinds, because that's going to matter in a little while. So He brought forth plants that reproduce according to their kind. He has now taken the formless void earth that was apparently a ball of water, and He separated the water on the earth from water that is now magically above the earth somewhere that we can't find, and then poofed into existence in the middle of the ball of water all of the rest of the fucking planet. And now, since He has seen fit to do that, He's decided to produce plants that reproduce through seeds after their kind. we won't even get into other the other kinds of plants that exist. And God said, and then we have the third day, yet we still don't have anything to create a day out of. We just have the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. Now, wait a minute, I'm confused here, because here we are on day 4, and God has now seen fit to create lights in the sky to separate day from night. But over here, he said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. See, so what some Christian apologists will try to say is that the light that was created over here in verse 3 is not actually light, like visible light. That's the creation of Jesus, because he's the light of the world that separates darkness. He still hasn't explained how we have days, but some apologists will try to go back and say, oh, no, that was a different kind of light in verse 3. Now over here in verse 14, we finally get the actual light producing objects. Oh, wait a minute. And God said, let there be lights, plural, in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark the seasons and the days and the years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on earth. And it was so. God made 2 great lights. The greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. Oh, well, how fucking convenient. So let's break that apart a little bit. So God said, let there be 2 lights in the sky, a greater and lesser light. So presumably the greater light that governs the day is now the sun, which is a star, and the lesser light to govern the night, which is clearly distinct from the stars, because he goes on later to say, and some stars, is clearly the moon. Except the fucking moon's not a light, is it? No. The moon is a big fucking rock floating around in orbit around Earth. It's not a light at all. It is a surface that reflects light, which of course the desert-dwelling imbeciles who wrote this book couldn't possibly know. So when they were sitting there out in the desert pondering their fucking anuses and looking up into the sky, they saw the moon that was shining bright down upon them, and they said, oh look, it's the lesser light. But it's not a light. This is a book written by man. You can see man's filthy little fingerprints all over it. You can see his inability to understand the world that he's living in. This is clearly not God-breathed scripture, unless God too is an absolute fucking imbecile who doesn't even understand his own creation. The moon is not a light. It is a moon. It is a rock that reflects light down upon us all. So then, like haphazardly, as if this wasn't important, he scatters some stars into existence. Never minding the fact that there's just fucking absolutely trillions of them. We can't even count the numbers. Never minding the fact that the sun itself is a star. And never minding the fact that we couldn't possibly get any of the previous light that he's discussed without stars, which are the things that create the light. Furthermore, he says that when he created the 2 great lights in the sky, he set them to serve as signs to mark the seasons and days and years. But that's not how seasons work, is it? See, seasons are not governed by day and night. They're governed by the tilting axis of the earth. So when the earth tilts toward the sun in what we call summer in the northern hemisphere, it gets hotter. And when the earth tilts away from the sun in what we here in the northern hemisphere call winter, it gets colder. That's what causes the season. Never minding the other weather patterns on Earth are actually controlled by the moon. So the lights in the sky don't necessarily control the seasons. If Earth didn't tilt back and forth, we wouldn't have seasons. It's the tilting of Earth's rotational axis that causes the seasons. And then, of course, we get to mark the years and the days. Wait a minute, what? And let them govern to mark the seasons and days and years. But this is the fourth day of creation. So how can we be on day 4 of creation and just now he created the things that allow us to have days? He says in his own book that these lights would mark the days. So what was marking the first 3 days of creation? There was nothing to mark these days. What you can see happening here is it's like the biblical author was up the side of the mountain with his stone and chisel, and he's been furiously banging at this fucking rock for God knows how long, hammering out all these lines that he doesn't want to have to redo because it's stone and chisel work. And then he gets to day 4 and he goes, oh shit, I fucked up. I need something to make days out of. Okay, fuck it. I'll put the sun and the moon in on day 4, and maybe no one will notice. Totally asinine bullshit. But going further, and God made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the night to give light on earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. Wait, separate light from darkness? Oh no. This is going to cause a problem with the Christian apologetics Jesus thing, isn't it? Because again, going back over here to verse 3, and let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. And then he says again in verse 18, I believe, God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. So you see, you can't actually stick Jesus in here and try to apologize for the ignorance in verse 3, because God or the biblical author turns back around in verse 18 and admits that it is in fact the lights in the sky that separate light from darkness. And of course, then we have evening and morning, the 4th day. So finally on day 4, we actually get the things that create the days. What a genius God is. Are you starting to figure out why all your prayers fall on deaf ears? Are you starting to figure out yet, like, why none of your Christian ideas seem to actually work in practice? It's because even if your God exists, he's a fucking retard. He's clearly like the kid who rode on the short bus to school, and his creation makes absolutely no sense. None. I mean, I think chimpanzees, animals have figured out better cosmology than the biblical author clearly had a grasp of. In verse 20 we get, and God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the waters in the sea, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the 5th day. So God on day 5 creates land animals and fish before he gets to man. And at least, if we were looking for something to hang our hat on, at least when he gets to the creation of life, he managed to get it somewhat close to reality. And God said in verse 34, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. What? So God decided during creation which animals would be livestock and which animals would be wild? But that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, man decided this. He tamed these beasts at some point in our history. But the Bible would have you believe that God apparently chose during his time of creation which animals would be considered wild and which animals would be considered livestock. So we've got, according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. So now in day 6, we get the creation of animals first. Again, bravo God. You got another bit kind of right. Clearly, man evolved later in the chain of history than the creation of the other animals that crawl on the earth and swim in the sea. And then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all of the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. In our likeness, wait a minute. God, remember, God, the one and only true God. This is Christianity. This is monotheism. This is not paganism. We don't have multiple gods. We have one God. Then God said, let us, plural, make man in our image, plural. See, so what Christian apologists have tried to do is they've tried to say, this is actually the Trinity that's being referred to. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Of course, Jesus hasn't even been born yet. And even if you wanted to try to argue for the Trinity here, the entire premise of Christianity is that you have one God in 3 distinct beings, but it's still one. We never worship we only worship God independent of any other thing. So you can never divide God into a plural and still have a monotheistic religion. It's always been problematic that God is these 3 distinct but same things. But here in the Bible, the author betrays the truth. Then God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness. Then he goes on in verse 27 to say, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Which is interesting. So in case you're just now noticing, this is actually the first telling of creation. See, notice on day 6, we didn't get any of the details about how God independently created Adam and Eve. He's going to double back in the next chapter and break down how he managed to create Adam and Eve. But in chapter 6, he goes from saying, let us create man in our image, and then turns around and says, God created man in his own image. Interestingly enough, using the masculine his, and that he created male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. I apologize for all that noise. That's running water in the background. Be fruitful and increase the number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So let's get this straight now. God's just created man and woman, which we will later find out is Adam and Eve. And like all of the other creatures during his creation process, he's told them to be fruitful and multiply. Now later we're going to find out that incest is a major sin, but not yet apparently, because God only created Adam and Eve and told them to be fruitful and multiply, which means Adam and Eve were fucking their kids. That's the only way you can get creation of the entire species. If God only created one man and one woman, which he's going to explain, then incest was the only way we could have all gotten here. And incest is a very popular theme in the Bible, like I mentioned in one of my previous videos about Christians trying to ban porn. That's how Lot's daughters actually basically raped their father and committed incest. There's a lot of incestuous behavior all throughout the Bible, which is not surprising that the Christian church seems to be the bastion of sexual abuse in this country. Certainly the Catholic Church, but in every church, I mean, you never go very long without reading some article about some kid that got, male or female, that got molested or sexually abused in a church. The Mormons, I mean, are totally out of fucking control when it comes to this. There are entire sects of Mormons that just seem to be completely designed for the express purpose of sexual grooming and abuse of children. All of this, of course, done in God's good name. So then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. What? So God in his original creation produced plants for the express purpose of being the food of man and all creatures that live on earth. That's what that just said. So all the creatures living on earth were vegan, which is weird because it's usually like the leftists that are all vegan, which makes them actually closer to God in the Bible, because in his original creation, he says that he created all of the plants to be food for man and all of the animals that crawl on the earth. So can you imagine like the saber-toothed cats, you know, and the lions, you know, like what are they eating, fucking grass? So you've got all of God's creation, because remember, God had to create everything that was created in these 6 days, because evolution is not true. So you can't say, which is what apologists try to say. What apologists try to say is, well, God created the kinds of animals. So some of the kinds of animals would, you know, like the saber-toothed cats would come later. Well, that isn't making sense. That's evolution. That's evolution. And what kind of cat, for example, what kind of canine do you have that gets its sustenance from plants only? This is totally counterintuitive. Every single thing that we know about design of any kind, every predator on earth was designed by something, either God or evolution, to be very good at doing its job. Predators' jaws and teeth are designed for capturing, tearing, and devouring flesh. Vegetarian animals have completely different jaw structures and teeth designed for masticating, you know, plants and vegetables. So God in his infinite wisdom created predators supposedly intelligently designed to prey on the flesh of other animals, but said in his creation story that he was giving the plant-bearing fruits and trees and plants as food for all of his creation. And of course, God saw all that he made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the 6th day. Interestingly, that's the end of chapter 1. It ends right there. You have to go into the 2nd chapter of Genesis to get the final day of creation. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work the work of creating that he had done. He rested? What do you mean he rested? Is God like a bodybuilder that needs to take a day off to fucking recover? He rested on the 7th day. So try to wrap your brain around this. God in his infinite power and wisdom and all of his majesty and might has managed to spend 6 days in the earth day realm, in his existence in eternity. He has spent 6 days on earth, because remember, his spirit was over the surface of the deep, on earth, creating earth. And now he's very tired. What is he, like an old man? God needed a day of rest And so on the seventh day he rested, which causes a lot of problems in America. And this is funny how this gets broken down. Like, I didn't even know this. So in America, we start our week on Sunday, making Sunday the first day of the week. So our day of rest is the first day of the week. I've understood that in the United Kingdom and places in Europe, they start their week on Monday, which makes a hell of a lot more fucking sense biblically, because then Sunday is the seventh day and the day of rest. So all of the idiot fuck Christians in the United States who wrote all the Blue Book laws telling us all the things we couldn't do on Sunday, the Sabbath day, the day of rest, didn't even get it right. In America, Saturday is the Sabbath day. Saturday is the seventh day of the week. Saturday should be the day of rest. But oh no, you guys didn't figure that out. And so it's Sunday that all the stores close early and you can't get any fucking liquor in certain fucking dry areas. And you're supposed to do this is when you go to church. We do everything over here on the first day of the week. Are you starting to figure out that there's one common theme wrapped in this whole thing, and that's that none of it makes any fucking sense because it's completely asinine and inane? It only makes sense in one context. The only thing that makes the Bible make any sense at all is that it's just a book written by men 2,000 years ago who had no fucking understanding of science or reality or really common sense and logic at all. If you just take God out and put man in, this book here is a phenomenal work. It's impressive. It's amazing. It's a really great guide of how you might live your life 2,000 years ago. It's a fucking masterpiece of human ingenuity. The second you take man out of this book and tell me that the author is an omnibenevolent, omnipresent, omniscient, almighty creator God, you have totally lost your fucking mind. So hopefully you've enjoyed this intro video of me ripping this entire story to shreds. I intend to make quite a few of these videos coming up because, like I said, I am tired of certain members of our party fucking things up for the rest of us. You people need to stay out of the private lives of other human beings. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of changes on this channel coming up because I need to educate some members of our society about the reality of the world that we live in. So, like I said, I've read this book cover to cover twice. For those of you who are not Christians, you are probably going to really enjoy my takedown of basically every single facet of this book. And like I was saying earlier, this is a work of art for modern, for primitive man to have come up with. The problem is that we don't live in a world where otherwise intelligent human beings look at this book as a work of art written by people who were way ahead of their time at the time, and then grow and build upon it and try to build a viable civilization around it. Instead, we have decided that this is the end-all be-all, can never be changed, improved upon, literal word of the Almighty God, and that has caused more suffering and misery than maybe any other idea ever devised by man. And it's continuing to this day to cause suffering and misery. And so where I have tried for years to be a champion of the causes of the right, I can just as easily be your fucking enemy and rip your idiotic ideas to shreds, which is what I intend to do in the series coming up. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If not, I don't really give a shit. You didn't like the other content I was producing either, and so this is what you get instead. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you on the next one.